Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a pretty high stakes challenge, I think. Building a minimum viable product, an MVP in the, let's say, hyper-regulated world of healthcare SaaS. Yeah, if you're a founder listening or maybe an engineering lead in health tech, you probably know this feeling. You've got this huge list, right? Brilliant feature ideas. But figuring out the order, how to sequence them, it's tough.
It really is.
How do you launch something small, prove value fast, but also meet that incredibly high bar for compliance, for safety, security, handling protected health information, PHI? It's a totally different ballgame than your average SaaS app.
Oh, absolutely. Totally different. And that sequencing challenge you mentioned, that's really what our sources focus on. So our mission today really is to distill that down. What's the shortest, safest path to a payer-ready MVP?
Right.
And this MVP, it has to be built on a solid foundation, probably using, AWS or Azure, the big clouds. And it needs to win over those first, say, 50 users, but also survive the tough technical checks for enterprise pilots later.
So you avoid that horrible rebuild 6 months down the line.
Exactly. That's the goal. Avoid the painful, costly rebuild of your whole security and compliance setup because you didn't plan it from the start.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the definition. What even is an MVP in this context? Because it sounds like more than just features.
It is. It has to be what the sources called a thin, high-value slice, something that proves a single, measurable outcome for a really specific user.
Okay, so before you even think about code, the sources are saying documentation. But focused documentation, like constraint.
Yes, constraint is key. First up, define the one primary job to be done and be ruthless about it. Don't just say improve patient throughput. That's too vague.
Right. Be specific, like cut referral triage time for clinic staff by 30%. Something concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Measurable. And you also need to know, precisely who your first 50 users are. What are their roles? What kind of organizations, what devices are they actually using day to day?
And this part sounds crucial. A list of non-goals for version 1, things you are actively deciding not to build yet.
Absolutely critical. If it's not on the must-ship list, it's explicitly out for V1. That focus is vital, mainly because of the immediate compliance hit.
Okay. So if that V1, that thin slice, touches PHI at all,
then compliance isn't optional later. It's now. HIPAA controls, getting those business associate agreements or BAAs in place. They become fundamental design requirements right from the beginning. You have to plan for them immediately.
Okay, hold on. That raises a big question for me. If a startup is really just trying to prove the workflow works, get that initial validation, shouldn't they try and maybe push back the huge regulatory lift? I mean, doesn't bringing in BAAs and all that on day one just crush the timeline, make it impossible to move fast?
It definitely sounds painful, I get that.
Yeah.
But the sources we looked at, they're pretty clear on this. The risk of handling PHI even a little bit without the proper BAA structure and the right controls in place, it's just too high.
Like existential risk.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It could sink the company before it even gets off the ground.
Yeah.
So the effort has to go into minimizing the scope of PHI in the MVP. Make that scope as small as possible.
Yeah.
But whatever PHI you do touch, it needs those planned controls from the start. You're proving value, yes, but proving value
safely. Okay.
And this flows right into understanding the clinical reality, which honestly is often a massive blind spot for tech teams coming into healthcare.
Right. We design for ideal conditions, maybe sitting at a nice clean desk with a big monitor.
Exactly. But healthcare settings, they're rarely like that.
No, definitely not. The clinical environment itself is maybe the biggest constraint. The sources talk about really needing to map out the human system. Clinical sessions, often super short.
Multitasking constantly.
People multitasking, maybe using shared terminals on those rolling carts, or maybe it's BYOD, bring your own device, their own phones, tablets. If your app needs like a long login or 30 seconds of undivided attention,
forget it. It'll fail. It just won't fit how people actually work.
Yeah.
That's why the single most useful practical tip we found for this MVP stage is shadow 2 real users. Actually watch them doing the task you want to automate.
Not just interviewing them in a nice meeting room.
No, watch them in their environment. Record every delay, every awkward workaround, every time they have to enter the same data twice. The advice is design your MVP to remove the biggest 1 or 2 friction points you see. That's how you guarantee value they'll feel immediately.
Okay, that makes sense. Solve the biggest pain point first. So we've got the thin slice. We understand the user's messy reality. How does this all get translated into the sort of the legal docs and the technical design?
Right. Well, what's fascinating here, and this was a key theme, is that regulations aren't just annoying legal hurdles you jump over at the end. They're actually fundamental design inputs. They shape the tech build from the ground up.
Okay, design inputs. How so?
You start by setting your regulatory baseline.
Yeah.
First, map your IPO scope. You need a document listing every single place PHI gets collected, processed, stored, or even just displayed on a screen.
Every place, like even logs, backups,
Every
analytics.
single one. Front-end logs, backup tapes, analytics databases, error tracking, everywhere. Then you tackle the BAAs, and this is where startups often stumble. You absolutely need a BAA with your main cloud provider, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whoever.
Right, that seems obvious.
But it's not just them. It's every vendor that could potentially touch PHI.
Yeah.
Think about your error tracking system, maybe a tool you use for data import, your analytics platform.
Wow. Okay, so any third-party service.
If it sees PHI, yes. It needs a valid BAA, and usually a data processing agreement, a DPA as well.
That sounds like it could become a huge legal bottleneck, especially for a startup using lots of different SaaS tools. How do you manage that early on without, spending your entire seed round on lawyers?
Well, the practical advice is to create a vendor BAA matrix, basically an inventory.
Yeah.
This forces you early on to check if your potential vendors are HIPAA compliant and if they have standard agreements ready to go. It helps you choose vendors wisely from the start.
Makes sense. Prioritize vendors who are already set up for this.
Exactly. And one more thing for founders thinking bigger, thinking enterprise deals down the road, SOC2. System and Organization Controls 2.
Ah, yes, SOC2. Hear that a lot.
You can't really ignore it. Getting fully SOC2 Type 2 certified takes time, a lot of effort. But you need to decide on a phased approach early. Big enterprise partners, hospitals, they will ask for it, probably even for pilots. So building your controls with those SOC2 requirements in mind right from the start, that's an essential planning step. You're designing for that future trust, even when you're tiny.
Got it. So these early steps give you the essential paperwork. The scope doc, the vendor matrix, a data retention policy, proof you've thought it through.
Okay, let's shift gears to the technical architecture itself. The guiding principles seem to be simplicity first, plan for scale later.
Exactly. Which can feel a bit counterintuitive sometimes, especially with everyone talking about microservices these days.
Right. Isn't the default just microservices now? It often is, but the strong recommendation here for this healthcare MVP, start with a monolith first, a single application. But, and this is important, with really clear modular boundaries inside it.
Okay, but hang on. If we go monolith first, aren't we just kicking the can down the road, creating technical debt we'll have to pay off later when we do need to scale massively? Why take on that risk?
That's the standard argument for sure. But in this specific MVP stage, especially with healthcare regulations, the monolith dramatically reduces your security surface area. It simplifies things.
How so?
Think about it. Building, say, a dozen microservices means a dozen API endpoints to secure, multiple databases possibly, complex network rules between them, all needing intense security audits. A single, well-structured monolith. It's faster to build initially, much easier to audit thoroughly, and far simpler to secure for that first BAA.
Ah, okay. Fewer moving parts to lock down early on.
Precisely. Defer breaking it into microservices until you actually hit performance bottlenecks or your team structure really demands it. Don't do it just because it's trendy.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, multi-tenancy. Isolating data for different customers. The sources mentioned two main ways.
Yeah, basically two common patterns. First is database per tenant. Each customer gets their own separate database. Simple, great isolation, but it can get expensive as you add customers.
Right, managing hundreds of databases.
Exactly. The second option is a shared schema model. Everyone shares the same database structure, which is cheaper to run initially. But, and this is huge, but in healthcare, you need incredibly strict row-level security and per tenant keys baked in everywhere.
Okay, and the sources flagged that shared model as having serious risk. Why is getting that row-level isolation wrong such a disaster here?
It's probably the highest technical risk for data exposure. If there's a bug, maybe a slight misconfiguration in a query, and one customer accidentally sees any PHI from another customer, that's not just a bug, that's a massive HIPAA breach.
Yeah.
Potentially reportable, fines, lawsuits.
Yeah.
The work implementing that row-level isolation perfectly across your entire application, your APIs, your reporting, it's technically very challenging. Which is why database per tenant, while maybe more costly upfront, is often considered safer initially. If you do go with a shared schema, your testing and validation burden just went way, way up to prove that isolation is absolutely bulletproof.
Got it. High stakes indeed. What about feature flags?
Oh, definitely. Always include feature flags, especially for anything risky or touching regulated workflows. Say you're building a new way to handle authentication or maybe a data export feature. Flags let you deploy the code to production, maybe turn it on just for internal testing or one trusted beta customer, while keeping it hidden from everyone else until legal and compliance are totally happy.
Smart. De-risk the rollout. Okay, moving down the stack to networking security. What are the absolute must-haves?
Non-negotiables here. Data stores your databases. Any file storage with PHI, they must live in private subnets, completely walled off from the public internet.
So no direct public access at all.
None. Public access should only ever come through secure load balancers.
Yeah.
And critically, in front of everything, you absolutely must deploy a web application firewall, a WAY, and probably a content delivery network, or CDN, like AWS CloudFront, or similar.
Why the TWA specifically?
The WAY is your frontline defense against common web attacks, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, even basic distributed denial of service DDoS attacks. In a regulated space like healthcare, protecting that web entry point with a WAY isn't really optional. It's considered baseline security.
Okay, baseline. Got it. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, as you hinted earlier. Interoperability. Talking to the big electronic health record systems, the EHRs.
Ah, the beast, yes.
This feels like where so many health tech startups just die. They get bogged down trying to integrate with Epic or Cerner right out of the gate. What's the smarter phased approach?
Yeah, this is critical. The absolute cardinal rule is do not start with the hardest integration. Don't try to boil the ocean on day one. The plan must be phased.
Okay, so phase one.
Phase one has to be simple. We're talking comma-separated values, CSV files, or maybe secure flat file exchange, like SFTP.
CSV, seriously? That sounds kind of ancient in 2024.
It does sound ancient, but here's why it's smart. It lets you prove your core workflow value, demonstrate that business outcome you defined, without spending 6 months and a fortune on security reviews, API certifications, complex HL7 integration engines, all that heavy lifting.
Okay. Prove the concept works with simple data exchange first.
Exactly. Prove the business model makes sense. Then, once you've shown that value, you move to phase two. That's where you start playing in the FHIR sandbox environment. FHIR is the modern standard fast healthcare interoperability resources. You test out things like Smart on FHIR apps.
Get comfortable with the standard APIs.
Right. And only then, once you've proven the value and you understand the APIs, do you move to phase three. That's investing in the production EHR APIs.
Yeah.
Maybe dedicated integration engines. But you do it knowing your core product actually solves a problem people will pay for.
That makes a lot more sense than trying to tackle Epic on day one. What about just the basic hygiene for these interfaces, even the simple CSV ones?
Oh, hygiene is absolutely paramount. You need clear documentation mapping fields, obviously. But the most critical piece is having strict policies around patient identity. How are you using the medical record number, the MRN, or maybe the Hospital Systems Enterprise Master Patient Index, the MPI?
For matching and making sure you don't duplicate patients.
Precisely. Because the #1 clinical risk with any data exchange is matching the wrong patient to the wrong data. Your system, even the MVP, needs absolute certainty about who the patient is. Get that wrong, and the consequences are severe.
Okay. So the MVP isn't really done until it's proven safe and usable. Let's talk testing. What needs to be in place?
Right. You need the basics, of course. Automated tests covering your units, your integration points, especially for the critical paths, the hot paths. Contract tests for your APIs are important too, making sure they don't break unexpectedly. And simple smoke tests after every deployment.
That sounds like standard good practice. What about the security-specific testing? You mentioned SAST and DAST.
Yes, both are really necessary and should be part of your CI/CD pipeline, your automated build process. SAST, static application security testing, analyzes your code before it runs. It looks for patterns, potential vulnerabilities like, say, SQL injection risks or insecure library use.
Okay, finds problems in the code itself.
Right. Then DAST, dynamic application security testing, works differently. It attacks your running application, usually in a staging environment, trying to find security holes from the outside, like a real attacker might.
So one looks inside, one looks outside.
Kinda, yeah. Together, they catch a lot of common application-level security flaws. And this is the big one, the mandatory, absolutely critical step before you take this thing into any kind of enterprise pilot where it touches real PHI, you must have an external penetration test.
Done by a separate independent company.
Absolutely. An independent third party needs to hammer on your system, look for vulnerabilities you missed, getting that clean bill of health from a pen test. That's non-negotiable proof of your security posture for potential partners.
Okay. Now, the elephant in the room these days, AI, artificial intelligence. Every founder wants AI features. What did the sources say? What's the rule for including AI in a healthcare MVP?
Yeah, AI is tempting, but the rule here, driven by the high regulatory and clinical risk, is pretty strict. Only include AI features if they materially, significantly improve the core outcome.
So, no AI for AI's sake.
Definitely not. If the AI is just like a cool recommendation engine that's kind of nice to have, or it adds some minor convenience, save it for later. It adds huge complexity around data governance, proving model validity, tracking data lineage, getting consent. It's a massive undertaking.
Okay, but what if the AI is core to the value prop?
If you do include AI and it's making suggestions that could impact clinical decisions, then the mandatory requirement is human in the loop. Always. Meaning the AI can generate an insight, a score, a recommendation. But a qualified human clinician must review and approve it before any action is taken based on it. The AI assists. It doesn't decide autonomously in high-risk scenarios. And of course, all the data governance stuff, clear consent, knowing where the training data came from, robust de-identification procedures, that all becomes absolutely essential.
Right. Huge responsibility there. Okay, so let's say you've navigated all this. You launch this tightly scoped, secure MVP. How do you know if it's working? What defines success in those first, say, 90 days? What metrics prove you actually nailed that job to be done?
Good question. You need clear success metrics. First is activation. What percentage of new accounts, new users actually complete that core task, that job to be done within maybe their first week?
Okay, are they actually using the core feature?
Exactly. Then, time to value. How long does it take, maybe in minutes, from their very first login to achieving that first successful outcome? If that time is really long, it probably means your shadowing maybe wasn't thorough enough or the workflow is still too complex.
Makes sense. It should be fast if you solved the main pain point.
It should feel like an immediate win. On the technical side, you're watching reliability. Your error rate needs to be super low, ideally well under 1%, and your P95 latency, how long the slowest 5% of requests take, needs to be consistently under whatever threshold you set. Performance matters.
And user adoption.
Yeah, finally, adoption depth. Look at the number of active users per account or per clinic. If it's just one person, your initial champion, using it, you haven't really solved a team-wide problem yet, which might limit your ability to sell bigger deals later. You want to see broader engagement.
Okay, clear metrics. So wrapping up, let's quickly run through the absolute go-live readiness checklist, the foundational things that must be in place before you handle live PHI.
Right, the non-negotiables. Identity has to be solid. That means multi-factor authentication, MFA, enforced everywhere, ideally supporting single sign-on, SSO, for enterprise clients.
Security basics.
Baked in, encryption at rest for all stored PHI, using proper key management like AWS KMS or Azure Key Vault. And TLS encryption for all data in transit, every connection, internal or external. No exceptions, period.
Auditability.
Crucial for HIPAA. Audit logs covering access, changes, exports they have to be enabled, securely stored for the required retention period, and importantly, they need to be searchable. If an auditor asks who accessed patient X's record last Tuesday, you need to be able to answer quickly.
Backups.
Not just doing backups, but proving they work. Your backups must be tested. You need documented proof that you can actually restore the data successfully. And you need defined targets for RPO and RTO recovery point objective and recovery time objective.
Right, RPO and RTO. Can you give us the quick why they matter definition again? They sound technical but seem critical.
Yeah, they're fundamental for disaster recovery. RPO, recovery point objective, is about data loss.
Yeah.
How much data can you afford to lose in a disaster? If your RPO is, say, 1 hour, it means you need backups frequent enough that you'd lose at most 1 hour of data.
Okay, and RTO.
RTO, recovery time objective, is about downtime. How quickly do you need to get the system back up and running after a failure? In healthcare, unlike maybe some other sectors, both RPO and RTO targets usually need to be pretty aggressive because downtime or significant data loss can directly impact patient care. Minutes matter.
Got it.
Yeah.
Very clear. And the last piece, environments.
Absolutely. Critical security control. Separate development, staging, and production environments. And there must be strict technical controls blocking any PHI from ever entering non-production environments. Developers should never be working with or debugging using live patient data. Use properly de-identified or synthetic data only.
Okay. So this whole deep dive really clarifies it. A healthcare MVP, it doesn't need to be massive with tons of features. It needs to be incredibly clear on its goal, provably safe, and rigorously tested. And the core finding seems to be you absolutely have to build it on a solid foundation from day one. Things like strong identity management, strict tenant isolation, audited access. That foundation needs to be strong enough to eventually support enterprise scale. Compliance isn't just some checklist you tick off. It's actually a core feature you have to build into the product itself.
Well said. It is a feature.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, if compliance and security really do have to be baked into the first commit, as they say, it raises a pretty fundamental question, I think, for anyone building in this space.
Which is?
How much does that intense regulatory burden fundamentally reshape the relationship between your technical team and your legal and compliance folks? Does it force a level of a collaboration, a shared ownership of the product roadmap right from the very beginning in a way that you just don't see in almost any other SaaS vertical? Is that unique pressure actually a driver for better, safer products in the long run?
That's a fascinating thought. Does the regulation itself force a different, maybe better way of building software? Something for every health tech company to really consider. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sometimes daunting world of the healthcare SaaS MVP checklist.
Yeah.
We really hope this gives you, if you're out there building a pragmatic roadmap to launch safely and successfully.
I hope it helped.
We'll catch you next time on the deep dive.